So if you've already had that first awakening, that first glimpse into the nature of who you really are, you probably felt that peace, boundless freedom and clarity, and you probably thought that that would last forever. But instead, you've now found yourself stuck in obsessive thoughts, repeating and looping fears, even after you already thought you dealt with them. And perhaps you're even feeling that contracted and stuck sensation of fear that's sitting somewhere in your body, like you just can't get rid of it. And in worst cases, it can even feel like a stabbing pain. And the hardest part about this phase of an awakening journey is you might even be judging yourself for it with self-judgment, guilt, or even in worst cases, shame, feeling like you shouldn't be experiencing this or that there's something completely wrong with you because everything just feels so out of control when those obsessive thoughts and fears arise. A lot of times you might even feel like you're going crazy or just completely losing it. But the truth is what you're experiencing is not only just a part of awakening, it's an actual integral process, a mechanical process that serves a very important purpose. And the reason I'm making this video now is because almost every single person I've spoken to recently on a coaching call has carried the exact same feeling of self-judgment, self-criticism, guilt and shame around what's happening to them and around this phenomenon that I call the destabilization effect during a spiritual awakening. But the thing is once I explain to them on the call what's happening, exactly the mechanics and the reason behind this effect of destabilization, every single time they feel like a huge weight has been lifted off their shoulders, a huge relief in knowing that it's not that there's something wrong with them, it's an integral part of the process. And so I wanted to make this video in the hopes that if you're feeling the self-judgment, blame, guilt and shame that's associated oftentimes at this phase of an awakening, that you can feel some sort of relief as well and hopefully stop that self-judgment in its tracks. Hi, my name's Todd. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, I like to talk about all things consciousness, non-duality, and the hidden mechanics of reality so you can be more empowered on your own awakening journey. And if any of those topics resonate with you, you can subscribe to join the community here and be notified of upcoming releases. And just before we get into the video here, I quickly want to mention something in case you're interested, because dozens and dozens of people around the world have now downloaded a free gift that I've created for you. It's a 27-page step-by-step guide called the Resistance Map, and it's targeted to walk you through how to find the root cause behind your fears and clear them from your system in the most efficient way. And I created that as a free gift to you just for being here. So if you're interested in that, you can download it by clicking the link in the first line of the description or in the pinned comment. Now let's get into today's video. Now, typically to spark an awakening, there usually has to be a catalyst, and the catalyst usually comes in the form of a glimpse. It can come in many forms really, but a glimpse is one of them. A clear seeing into your true nature, even though temporarily, it can definitely serve as that initial point of awakening where you feel like something about yourself, something about the reality around you is not what you originally thought. My personal experience with this was actually many, many years ago now, about 7 years ago, and it was in applying the law of attraction and manifestation techniques and seeing the shift in the reflection of the outer world when I changed my inner world. That really created the catalyst of that first awakening, because it started to destabilize the very idea of what I'd bought into as being the truth of nature, the truth of this physical reality for my entire life up until that point. And so at that first point of awakening, there is usually some sort of clear seeing of the truth of who we really are that destabilizes the very ideas that we've bought into up until that point. And in this graphic here, we can kind of look at it as if this is the point where we truly and fully believe that we're the separate self. So you could say, in some sense, this is when we're asleep. We believe everything that society's told us about who we are and the world around us, and we feel somewhat encased in a physical body. And a shell of energy actually contracts around the body because of that belief to further reinforce the very felt sensation that we are a separate individual, we are the character that we're embodying. And then that first glimpse happens. It's the seeing through of the illusion, no matter how temporary it is. It can be for a minute, it can be for a week, it can be even be for a few months. I've spoken to people who have their first glimpse and it lasts for up to a few months. But eventually what happens is that seeing through gets pushed back, and the mechanism doing the pushing back is the old identification with the ego operating system. It's the identification as being the separate self. And so the old operating system, or the ego identity, begins to lash out by throwing up all of its beliefs into your conscious awareness. However, this is usually the point of no return, because once there's been a seeing through and once those cracks have started to emerge within the old operating system, there's no going back because you've seen too much. That deeper truth that you saw cannot be unseen, and it's all part of the process. And so when that destabilization phase does occur, that is when the turbulence usually begins to arise. This can often be described as the dark night of the soul. It's described under many different ways, but this is really the beginning of what's known as the alchemical process and the alchemy of transmuting all the distortions, all the false beliefs, everything that's essentially been bought into and is untrue or misaligned with the truth of the core nature of the self. Everything fundamentally needs to be brought to the surface to conscious awareness to be cleared and transmuted. And this is exactly where a lot of those obsessive thoughts, those repeating patterns of fear can arise, and usually do arise, and they can actually usually cycle out for quite a period of time, quite a long period of time potentially. But with every cycle, with every layer of that fear that gets removed, you get to access a deeper portion, getting closer and closer to the roots of those fears, and then eventually they will diminish and fall away completely as they get completely transmuted and transformed into the core frequency of the self and the clear seeing of truth. And so that's exactly why that this process is absolutely nothing to do with judgment, guilt, shame, and self-criticism, because this process in itself is a very important part of going to a full awakening, a full remembrance of who you really are. So if that's you I'm speaking directly to right now, who's been feeling guilty, shame, self-critical, self-judgment, feeling like you're going crazy and you don't know what's happening, try and take that weight off your shoulders, because this is a very important part of the process in itself. The reason it's so important is because over time, those fears, that contracted energy, and all of those distortions that sit around your aura, your energy field, and even within the physical body, clear, diminish, unwind, and more truth and more of your own frequency at the core can come into your experience, be fully embodied, and you'll realize that that belief of being the separate self falls away more and more over time until it's completely gone. And this is where the mystic traditions talk about the complete dissolution of self, is the fundamental clearing, eradicating, transmuting of everything we're not, all the illusion, all of those false beliefs, so that the truth can fully be seen. And paradoxically enough, when that is fully seen, that you are never the separate self, it's also seen that all of those beliefs, all of those illusions were actually never fundamentally there to begin with, because all that exists is the core self behind it all. So you could say it's like the light of your soul is permeating and embodying the idea of being a separate self, which creates a certain type of experience of navigating the world with subject-object perception and fully believing in that experience of a separate world of duality, a separate world of subject-object, and then only to eventually realize throughout this whole process that you were the light behind all of it. And it even goes one step further than that, because the light in itself is itself a manifestation from the self. So as we may or may not know, anything that can be defined, observed, or become aware of is fundamentally not the truth of who we are. And so that's why it's really important to eliminate that self-judgment and guilt and self-criticism from the equation during this journey, because it really is a journey of completely dispelling all illusions that we've chosen to buy into and experience by embodying such a contracted and limited state of being temporarily. And to assist in this journey, we really can start to take a look when this destabilization phase comes up. We really can be proactive about it in deliberately shining our own light, our own awareness on the shadow. All those parts of ourselves that we've rejected and disowned in the illusion, we can become proactive and start looking at these and fundamentally not resisting what we find, because that act of allowance and that act of shining our own awareness on our shadow and on all these distortions and false beliefs aids in the transmutation and the clear seeing through those. And as we see through more and more of the shadow and more of the false self, the illusion of the false self, it clears and it allows us to embody more and more of who we really are. And there's phases to it. So a proactive way to begin doing that is by actively meditating or actively looking in at the core root of different fears and different shadow aspects that may come up or that you may be able to proactively find by looking for them and really inquiring into those beliefs and who's the one that had those beliefs. And then eventually you'll get to the phase where you can just sit in your own presence, your own I am awareness, and just keep inquiring into the self over and over again. Like Ramana Maharshi would talk about inquiring into the I. And as you continue to inquire and peel back the layers of false beliefs, they become more and more subtle. And then you'll even start looking at, well, who is the one even inquiring into this? And so that's a little glimpse into a little bit of a journey arc that you might expect. Not everyone does experience it in exactly that way, but it does seem to be a common thread or a common theme about how this process usually plays out. And if you want to be really proactive about looking into and mapping out those core fears and the roots of those fears and discovering them so you can clear it, my free gift, again, the resistance map, that 27-page guide, you can download it, click the link in the description, and it'll step you through how to be proactive and unearth and discover and clear those fears and that shadow at the core so it can be integrated and you can experience more and more of that boundless freedom of your core vibrational frequency and true self. So the key behind this video is really just to let you know that self-judgment, guilt, shame, self-criticism is really a huge illusion in itself, and it's also one of the ego's nastiest tricks because it's trying to make you feel guilty that this important process is playing out. I hope that helps you feel some clarity and some relief around that and around this process if that's what you're experiencing, exactly like it has for people on my coaching calls. So I'll leave the video off there. I'll be interested to know what you've experienced in the comments section. Download that resistance map free gift if you're interested, and I'll see you in the next video.